Hi, this is Samir and Enya, and this is our EE332 final project where we did the smart eraser. So our problem statement is that we are given this video of a pen going over a text, and this text is covered with a red text that says, "Can you erase me?" And in the video, we want to erase that red text that says, "Can you erase me?" as the pen is tracking across the screen itself. So our objectives are that we want to track the pen as it moves throughout the video. And as the pen is being tracked, we want to remove the red text. And then as we remove the red text, we want to replace that text with a synthesized texture of the background text. So for overall algorithm, we're going to first break the video into frames. We are then going to synthesize the texture itself. We're going to then track the pen and then fill the texture in that region corresponding to the red text. And then we're going to recompose the video from the retextured frames. So the first step in developing our texture is that we want to take many different samples of some sort of specified block size from one singular frame of the video. And so we did this in a kind of a restricted sampling. So we sampled from only the red box shown in the top right, where we took a bunch of candidates, about 1,000 candidates from that region. We also tried sampling from the entire image itself, and we also tried sampling from the bottom text. We found that when we sampled from the bottom region of the text, we got a lot of like shadowing effects in the region where we were going to replace the red text. And when we tried sampling the whole image, then we ended up adding back that red that we were trying to remove. So that's why we sampled from just the top region. So for the texture synthesis, we first took a sample frame of the video. So we used framed 216. We then located the area of the text to be removed. So where it says, "Can you erase me?" We then looped through that area using blocks of the same size as the candidates. We then collected a block of pixels directly above that block that we were trying to replace and directly to the left. And then from those blocks, we then calculated a sum of square difference to find the difference between the overlapping regions of the top block and the block we were replacing, and then the left block and the block we were replacing. So when we're calculating the sum of square difference, we're doing kind of like two extra steps. First, we're normalizing the matrix. So we're taking each of the overlapping regions that we were comparing, each of the two different overlapping regions that we were comparing, and we calculated the sum of squares in those regions, and then we divided those images by the sum of squares to remove some shadowing effects. And then we inputted those normalized matrices into the sum of squares difference equations to calculate an SSD to compare to the two overlapping regions. And then we actually used a weighted SSD. So the sum of squares difference total for each candidate is going to be the sum of squares difference between the candidate and the left overlapping region and the upper overlapping region. However, we multiply the upper overlapping region by a weighing factor, so in this case 5. And that was to increase the consistency of the texture synthesis going up and down the image versus to the left and the right. And that's because the texture itself is more going up and down versus going left to right. So we did have some fails when we were trying to do this texture synthesis at first. So some of the common issues that we kind of ran into was that you could see like a discrepancy of the region where the red text was originally and the background text, which is kind of shown in the left image. We also got some retextured images that had some weird shadowing effects where the region of the replaced text ended up being darker than it should have been. And this kind of made the overall texture just look kind of weird and different from what it's supposed to be. And then finally, we also got some weird kind of like blending effects where the replaced texture didn't properly blend in with the texture of the background.
Image we wanted to have this new texture overwritten onto for each frame. The way we did this was we filtered the image by a threshold of the red value. So if the red part of the pixel was high enough, then that pixel was kept, otherwise it was thrown out. And essentially, once we had all of the most red pixels, we determined that the tip of the pen was the highest of those red pixels, so above a certain line on the image. Once we had found the tip of the pen in the first image and drawn a box around it, we used this box through SSD, similar to how we did in machine problem 7, to find the pen in the rest of the frames. So essentially, in each subsequent frame, you looked in a local exhaustive search around the region where the pen had been in the last frame to determine where the pen had moved to in the next frame. Finally, from this function that we created to do this, we returned the average of the x coordinates of this rectangle we had drawn around the tip of the pen so that we knew the x coordinate of where we wanted to erase up to in that frame. So here are the results that we got by doing all of that. As you can see, the lines are very clear. There's no weird coloring like we had in some of the other images, and it was overall just the best result that we were able to get. But wait, there's more. Since we were just a group of 2 people doing the Smart Eraser, and so we had some extra time, we were wondering how easy it would be to find the lines of text that were actually created when we synthesize this pattern. Obviously, the lines are very important to how the pattern comes across, because if the lines of the text are continuous, that it looks how the text would be on a normal written page. So how we did this was first by black and white thresholding the image. So if the text was dark enough, it was turned into a white pixel, as you can see on the screen. And then if the text was light enough, it was turned into a black pixel. Then what we did is we looked at each column individually to find which columns were mostly black pixels, so aka the space in between the black text. Each column individually was looked at, and after a little messing around with the numbers, it was determined that there were a few outliers with either parts of the letters that were hanging up or down into the middle of the line. So we said if 2 or 3 of the pixels in the whole column were white, out of all of the rest of them being black, that meant that this was a spot in between the lines of text. And so then this was labeled as a column to draw a line on. However, sometimes you would get multiple columns. You would get multiple columns between the lines of text right next to each other, since there might be a few different pixel gaps between the 2 columns. So we would only take one out of all of those adjacent columns and filter out the rest. Finally, as you can see here, we took the average of those columns that we found in between each line of text in order to find where the actual line of text is itself. And now this might seem like a pretty intuitive way of doing this. In order to find the text, just look where the text isn't. But it actually works surprisingly well despite its simplicity. As you can see, there's not like a line of text missed within the green region, which is the only region we were looking at, since that was the region that we were erasing the red text from. But it didn't miss any, and it also didn't have any extra lines. So it performed really well in terms of actually finding where the lines of text were. So here's our results of counting how many lines of text we had passed over with our texture being filled in. So we use this method because the line text tracking, the line finding that we had used in one of the previous machine problems didn't work that well. There was a lot of horizontal lines that were found instead of vertical lines, since obviously this text is not very even in a vertical sense. So things we want to improve upon, first of all, less hard coding. In order to detect the pen, we had to look above a certain part of the image. So instead of doing this, it might be better to just threshold the red and then try to search for a region that was rectangular shaped or circular shaped or whatever the tip of the pen looked like, or even just something of the right size instead of having to hard code to look above the rest of the text. Also, we hard coded which area we wanted to cover up and the area that we wanted to sample from, when we probably could have used this red thresholding to find those areas in the first place. So this is definitely something that could be improved upon in the future. Additionally, we want to speed up the texture matching, because as it is, it takes a while to run for all the different candidates that we've chosen randomly to place within the texture filled section. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed our presentation and found it interesting. Here are our references.